One of the most exciting fighters in UFC history. Our guest today has 25 wins to his name, but has also been awarded Fight of the Night, Knockout of the Night, Fight of the Year, and more on multiple occasions. Despite his explosive actions in the cage, this mild-mannered family man leads a very different life day to day. But his fighting spirit and hunger for success still drives everything he does in every aspect of his life. Please join me in welcoming UFC featherweight legend Cub Swanson to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
I'm an artist and I'm just painting these paintings, and you know, I'm just waiting to have that masterpiece and go, wow, I just can't outdo this. I can't.
So I've read up, some people call you Cub, you got another nickname called the Killer. Complete contrast, you know, what do you normally go by?
Yeah, so, you know, I have my brand Killer Cub, and that's it. To me, I never really had a fight nickname just because Cub was kind of already my nickname. I was given that, you know, my real name's Kevin. Right. But ever since I was a baby, they called me Cub, so that's been my name. And then Killer kind of came into my fighting style. And then the Killer Cub is just kind of like, I'm a killer when I'm in the cage, and I get all that aggression out, and I become that monster that I feel like everybody has inside of them, you know. And Cub is my, you know, laid back everyday personality. So I feel like I show those two sides of me, and I'm able to put one, you know, the killer side into the cage, and then, you know, the Cub side is my everyday life. Yeah,
and they're complete contrasts. Yeah, you know, total. And when I first met you, it was a UFC conference in Vegas, and I'm kind of I understand the UFC well, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert in what goes on. And it was the first time I saw you, and I saw this sort of very mild, you know, polite, friendly guy, and you almost wouldn't hurt anything. And then I kind of watched the footage of the fight, and there was this kind of complete, you know, killer. You know, you wouldn't have thought it's the same person. So yeah. How do you kind of balance what goes on in the cage and what you are like outside of the cage?
You kind of grow and adapt to it. In the beginning, I was more rough around the edges all the time, and as I was able to kind of get that out more in a good setting, you know, and it's just really just utilizing my competitiveness and really having that outlet, it allowed me just to be more myself and more, you know, in tune with who I am, and really just mild-mannered and relaxed, because it's really not in my nature to want to have attention or anything like that. But when I'm competing, I'll thrive in the spotlight, but anytime out of it, I don't care to be famous. I don't care to be popular. You know, I'm just, you know, I want to live my life and simple. Right. Yeah. So I've been able over the years to really, you know, just develop as you know, who I am on both sides of it.
Yeah. So now you seem very balanced, good family man, very respected out of the ring. What was growing up like for Cub?
Well, I mean, I was quiet, and you know, as I had a lot of things happen early on in my childhood. You know, I was talked about often. My father passed away when I was 3 months old. Right. Just a lot of family issues, and you know, the biggest thing is I was always loved. I always had family around. Yeah, we moved around a little bit, and I had, you know, little things to deal with, but it seemed normal for me because that was my life. And I always had my two brothers with me, so just having to deal with all those things, yeah, it was hard, but not that hard, you know, so I can't really complain about that. But as a kid, really, I was always stubborn. And when I talk to kids nowadays, I always talk about how I was almost shamed about that, about being stubborn as being a bad thing. And yeah, it can be, but it depends how you use it. And being stubborn in this sport has made me successful. Right. And I think, you know, it's determined is another way to say it. So, yeah. You know, so as a kid, I was very stubborn, determined kid, but I was quiet, and I always wanted to do things my way. So growing up in team sports, I enjoyed that, and I learned how to be a team player and all that. But when I found mixed martial arts, it was the first time I ever did an individual sport, and really learned that I can do it my way. I can, you know, have trial and error and feel the ups and downs of being an individual sport. and really made me grow more as a person.
Right.
And I really, appreciative of that.
Yeah. So how young was it? Did you start with just scrapping at school, or did you come into martial arts and do it in a controlled way? What was
I mean, realistically, I was very non-confrontational. I still am. I'm not like, I don't really want problems. To me, it makes me like tense, and it brings a side out of me that I don't care to have. In the fight, it's controlled. It's respectable. Outside, it's not. And I don't really condone that. It's not something I really appreciate. But in and around high school, I grew a temper. And it was just that stage in my life where I had a lot of changes in my life as well, family stuff and things like that, a lot of situational stuff that made me kind of start to become a little bit more bitter,
Right.
And I was just hanging around a lot of bad people, not really bad people, but people making a lot of crazy life choices that I was as well, and it led me into situations where I did get into a lot of fights, but they were like a lot of brawls and just crazy situations, and that's when I started fighting for the first time. But I never really enjoyed it.
Right.
It wasn't something. I wasn't like a naturally mean person or anything like that. I never really wanted to get in fights, but I was willing to if I had to, type thing, fight or flight. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old that I started martial arts, and then I saw fighting for the first time. I don't know if I was still 19, about to turn 20, and then that's when I wanted to give it a try, and it scared the crap out of me. Like,
why is that?
Because I never wanted to fight in the first place. It's just something that happened. It's never like, hey, let's meet up and we'll fight. Like, I never wanted to do that. It was just if someone had a problem and I knew I didn't have a way out, then it was something I had to do. But to sign up for that and say, yeah, hey, we're gonna fight on this date, all these people are gonna come watch, that just seemed like a lot of pressure and a lot, a situation that I really didn't see myself wanting to get into. But when I really thought about it, it was the ultimate, test of me being a man, and does this martial arts work, and competitiveness and all that coming out at once. And I wanted to try it, and it scared the hell out of me, and that's why I wanted to do it. And,
right.
And now it's become a career for me.
Yeah. What was the first fight you had then?
So my first fight was in Tijuana, because it wasn't legal in California. It wasn't sanctioned, so you couldn't fight unless it was in Mexico or on Indian reservations. And so I fought in Tijuana, and I only had less than a year of training. Only knew jiu-jitsu, hadn't done any stand-up yet, and I got paired against another guy who ended up being in the UFC later, and we fought, and I lost in like 30 seconds. I jacked up my knee. We hit knees, and I buckled, and he jumped on my back, caught me in a full choke and body triangle, and I just, the worst case scenario. And it didn't go well for me. I made like less than $200, and that was my first pro fight. No amateurs, no nothing. It was just like get in and try it. So right after that, everybody, all my friends and family were like, did you get that out of your system? Because where I'm from, that it wasn't popular yet. Out here it was,
Where were you from?
Palm Springs area.
Oh, okay, right.
So Orange County, LA, San Diego was already starting to get popular. There was little niche, fight gyms. But where I lived, there was nothing. It was jiu-jitsu, and that's it. And it wasn't very popular. Like, oh, we're gonna do this cage fighting. It was very like, that like not a respectable living. You know. And so when I decided to do it and then losing, everyone's like, all right, it's not for you. And that just, my stubbornness and that just made me want it more. And I went on to win 11 fights after that.
Right. Yeah. So how did you fund yourself at that age too? Because obviously training and coaches, how did you make all that work?
Yeah, so I was not living on my own, but I had moved out, and I was living with my two brothers and another roommate, 4 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, like barely getting by. And rent in Palm Springs is a lot cheaper than it is in Orange County. And we were just barely getting by. I was working for a company called United Cerebral Palsy, And I was working with kids with disabilities in an after-school program and helping them with their social skills, which is funny because it's something that I needed to work on was my social skills, being a pretty quiet person. But yeah, just kids that, kids with autism and cerebral palsy that felt like they were not fitting in. We would try to get them to engage in games and things like that with kids that didn't have those, diseases. And so that's what I did. I worked in an after-school program, and I made decent money, but they were short hours. And so I trained. I barely paid my bills. I trained. I did competitions, and then I got to a point where I knew I wasn't going to grow as fast as I needed to catch up. And so I quit my job and I moved out here to Orange County, and it's been my full-time job. And I just made sure I did odd jobs and fought enough to pay my rent and have a couple dollars every day to eat. Like I barely had anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you have to come here to learn from people that were going to teach you
more
about what to do?
When I was in Palm Springs, my gym was open 4 days a week, and I went to every class and I trained as much as I could, and I ran every day that I wasn't, just doing cardio, trying to stay in shape. And then when I was going to fights, I was seeing the other camps and listening to what the other guys were doing, and they're training every day, twice a day, and it's their full-time job. And I'm like, man, I can't, compete with these guys. They're just going to grow so much faster than me if I don't do what they're doing. And so I made it a point to, just quit and step out of my comfort zone. And I had lived with my brothers my whole life, and I told them, like, I'm gonna move away and I'm gonna go pursue this. And they were kind of hurt about it, and but they understood that I was really passionate about it. And I just came out here with another training partner, and I just tried to do everything I could to become the best at it and give it my all.
Right. And what was that? You mentioned you being stubborn. Was part of that just because you wanted to show people you could do it, or did you just develop this real passion for wanting to be successful at a sport or to be successful as a person? What do you think was your motivation?
I think being stubborn, yeah, but it's more being stubborn with what I felt like I could accomplish.
Right.
I've always felt like, people like me are always a little delusional. Like, I always felt like if I really wanted to, I could have played in the NFL. I could have played professional soccer. Professional soccer is a little bit more realistic, but professional football isn't because of my size. But growing up, that didn't even come into my mind. If I felt like I could do something, there was no reality of, you can't do that, why not? I didn't believe in that. So I knew that I wanted to pursue this, and I didn't know that it would become a profession, because at the time it wasn't. What people weren't making a living off of it, so it wasn't a realistic thing.
Right.
And I just wanted to see. I didn't want to look back and go, man, if I would have given it my all, then I could have been somewhere. And the funny thing is I always kind of knew that. All the people that when I started up, and I got a lot of people to come train with me and come join my gym, so I would have more training partners. A lot of people dove in with me and then quit after 6 months, 8 months, 3 months. And because life, you can't always pursue something when you have kids or a full-time job. And all those guys, man, I wish I would have stuck it out. I'd be where you're at. And it's like, not really, because everybody's journey is different. But I didn't want to be one of those guys saying, man, if I would have stuck it out, where would I have made it to? I just wanted to see. I want to see as far as I could go before I call it quits.
Yeah. So what was some of your early influences? Because with your father passing away at a young age, was there a sort of a inspirational figure or anyone that kind of gave you that vision to go towards it all?
I guess my brothers were always there, and then my stepdad growing up was my dad's cousin who took us in, him and his wife. He was always encouraging of our soccer. That's what me and my brothers grew up traveling, playing soccer. So that was my first love. Just knowing that I enjoyed competing and being in a sport and getting these little moments of glory and passion in something was fun for me. But watching my brothers do it ahead of me, I'm always chasing them, you know, as being the youngest of the brothers. But I would say overall in my life, as far as people I look up to, I feel like I've always been easily inspired by movies, by books. Like something always catches me and it inspires me, and I feel like that's been something that's helped me be successful, is being easily inspired.
Right.
So I don't really like get hung up on huge heroes. I just can look at somebody and just, you know, like Kobe Bryant, you know, I'm not like going to be like everything about him. I love him. I'm a Lakers fan. I love his mentality, just that, you know, his mentality is that what they talk about. It's like unbreakable. I can see that and be inspired by that easily. You know, so many athletes along the way, or anybody that does anything worth anything, I can gain I can gain from that inspiration and be like, man, I want to do what they're doing as well.
Right. So how did your career change from, I guess, being a young kid, as you probably were when going to Tijuana, and then sort of with the UFC increasing its popularity, and then suddenly being on TV? How did you change as a person through that?
Well, it was big for me because, and I love this question because this is what martial arts is all about for me, and the fight game is like, right now people are getting into the sport because they want to be popular, they want to be famous, you know, certain people, and they're trying to, you know, be the drama queen, and they want all the attention, and for me that wasn't it. I was heading down a path in the wrong direction, and by my own choosing, and I was one of those people that just needed something to catch my imagination, something to catch my focus, something great, you know, that I wanted to pursue. And the martial arts was that. So when I started, I was really rough around the edges. I mean, I was in the streets, I was hanging out with people, I was getting picked up by the police, getting messed with constantly by them, and so you know, the kind of person I was when I came in was very rough. And the sport introduced me to great instructors, and my manager, who's, you know, pretty much my best friend. He's a doctor, and he's successful, and, you know, pursues martial arts, and he's always kind of showed me the ropes of, man, if you want to be successful, these are the things you need to do. This is how you got to carry yourself. These are the things you show. These are the things you don't do. And just having mentors like that in this has allowed me to become, you know, who I am today.
Right.
And that's kind of summed up, but with all the things coming from fighting in Tijuana, I was just trying to be the baddest, toughest dude there was, right? To losing a big fight is humbling, and learning to deal with that, learning to gain popularity locally, and then having that pressure on my shoulders of, oh, man, all of a sudden people are expecting things of me, and it's not just me. I'm almost representing my hometown and all these people that aren't really doing anything with their lives as far as trying to achieve something great. They're like putting it on me to represent them, you know what I mean? So doing that, to being on that stage nationally to globally, you know, growing into the UFC. So it was just, from when I started to where I am now, it just is increased. So I feel like who I am now, I'm able to have so much on my shoulders and carry a lot, you know, as where I was from a kid. I didn't want any responsibility. I was afraid of responsibility, you know. I think that's what kind of led me to getting into trouble, was being afraid of responsibility and taking on that pressure of paying bills and not getting into trouble, and carrying myself in a manner that is respectable and that people can look up to. Yeah. And so that's kind of the journey so far that it's been.
Do you think you were prepared for that success? Because I guess some people, when they go from being totally unknown to having the spotlight on them, and, you know, almost being able to have this, where you've got this power that I guess you can do good or bad with. Were you prepared with how to deal with that, do you think?
I mean, I don't think you ever are prepared. You're just the kind of person that can handle it or not. And I can see, like with movie stars, how some people just completely change. But for me, it was pretty gradual, with being on a small, like fighting in Mexico, to fighting locally, to fighting on a small television station, you know, with the WC, with the smaller market, to the UFC, to the headlining cards. and in that whole process, I was helping people ahead of me train and being along with the ride, you know, with them and seeing their mistakes, their things that made them, you know, good choices they made and bad choices they made. So, I mean, I literally was in this sport for a decade before I really made any real money and really felt any kind of financial gain and you know, stability.
Right.
You know, 29 to about 30 years old, so about a decade into the sport before I ever really, it started to pay off.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for that, you know, so I was a little bit more mature by the time it was my turn to see what I would do with, you know, the little bit of fame, a little bit of money, and you know, so I feel fortunate for that. I was gradually brought into it.
Yeah. So one of the things I've listened to about you is how you prepare for fights and prepare yourself, like, you know, immediately before, and also in the run up to it. When did you realize that was important, or is it something you've always realized? And then, you know, talk me through some of the preparation that you do mentally before, you know,
well,
big
it's
fight.
just, you know, before I would train 6 weeks for a fight as hard as possible. In 6 weeks, you don't really get a day off. You know, you have your days off, but if you happen to get hurt, you can't take days off because you already have your scheduled days off for when your body's going to rest. But then when you're supposed to be having a hard span of 3 days and you get hurt on the first day, then you lose those 3 days, and those are the three most important days of your week, and you miss that, then your whole week is gone. That's the way a fighter thinks, right? So your whole week, and you're just like, now I only train 5 weeks. Now it's a short camp, and then say you're hurt for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's just mentally you always feel like you're trying to play catch up rather than just being prepared. So of all the times I had to pull out of fights because I pushed and pushed and pushed without pulling back, and that's just really an insecurity over time. You know, you're not secure enough to know, like, I will be ready. It's like, I just got to keep training. In the beginning, that's how it is. And so over time, I learned I just have to make it to the fight. I'm losing out on so much money not getting to the fight and not being healthy. So what I started to do was having a pre-camp, and then the middle portion of my camp, and then finishing camp. And so the beginning of camp is just going through the motions, getting in shape, trying to break down game plan, trying to get all my skills sharp as possible. Then the middle of camp is like, all right, revving it up. And then the third portion of camp is like ending everything on a high note and then winding down. Right. So that way I have like 12, 14 weeks of camp that I've been preparing, not just for the fight, but any fight, you know, because usually that first portion, I don't even have an opponent or a date yet. I kind of give them a rough estimate because they won't tell me. But by the time they give me the fight, I've already been training 5-6 weeks. Right. Where other guys, I've literally done half my camp, and then the other guy would tweet like, "Oh, first day of camp," and I'm like I'm gonna double the weeks that you've done, so I just feel more prepared. Right. You know? And if I have to take a day off, I could take a day off.
You can do it.
I can take a week off, right? Because I'm prepared.
Yeah. And how much of it is really understanding your opponent and watching their moves and being able to prepare for that in advance, compared to, you know, when you just get close to the fight and someone drops out and then you've got to go in? You know, is that a huge handicap that you have to deal with?
Yeah, it's huge. People don't understand that fighting, especially if you're a more methodical fighter, the game planning and things like that, where it makes you have a more diverse game and you can adjust, but you can also make a lot of miscalculations. Sometimes it's better just to be the brute fighter that just goes in there and fights. But he's easier to game plan against sometimes because they're very basic, but sometimes that just works and the guy can beat himself overthinking. But people don't realize how intricate it is and how a game plan can throw you off or get you the win. It's like, you know, in NASCAR, you make a couple adjustments to the car and it could win you the race or lose you the race. So we, as fighters, we call it human chess, you know, because we literally are in there making split-second decisions, and in the midst of it, I take a kick and I lose my arm, you know, like it breaks or it just takes so much damage that all of a sudden, or I broke my hand, I don't have this hand anymore. So I'm using what I have left, and I'm calculating, okay, what are my best moves in this situation against this style with these 3 limbs, you know, or I've broken both hands in a fight, and going, okay, how do I continue to fight through this? Because I'm not going to quit, because that's not who I am, you know. So it's a very serious human chess match,
right.
And it's probably, to me, one of the purest, rawest sports that there is.
And how much of it would you say is roughly the mental side? Like you see people that physically they look like machines, and you know, sometimes when you're looking at together, you know, they look bigger, they seem faster and stronger, but then, you know, sometimes the guy who doesn't look that, you know, just seems to kind of know what to do. What part of it is mental, and, you know, really being able to control your thoughts and being strategic, would you say?
I mean, it's so much mental, because even the way people talk to you, man, you learn so much as you go on. But like in particular, I was gonna fight a guy that was a big striker, and he was dropping in weight, and I'm known as a striker as well, but more well-rounded, especially back then. And so when I would say, fans would say, oh, you got a fight coming up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm fighting so-and-so, and they're like, ooh, wow, you know, just their reaction. And it, you know, it's like, okay, whatever, but if 20 people do that to you in the span of 3 weeks, it starts to, so I had to learn to say something back and basically like defend myself, because I'm not gonna argue with a fan, because they always, if you argue with a fan, they're always gonna assume that you're a jerk, right. You know, because they don't realize what they're saying. So if they'll say something negative, then I'll just say, yeah, well, I'm very capable, I'm good, you know, you'll see, you know, whatever. You just got to kind of combat that. You can't just take it, because people will just say things, and you just take it builds up. Yeah. And so for me personally, that's the way I've had to deal with it. Other people are different. They can brush it off, or they can be rude. They don't care. I don't want to be rude, but I also don't want to let you talk down to me, even though you don't know you're talking down to me.
Yeah. And well, I guess with the increase in social media and so many people now having opinions, and you've got your own Facebook and Instagram page, do you read that stuff, or do you use it to fuel you? How do you deal with?
Yeah, I do read it, because I try to filter out, like, you know, the people that are just talking crap to talk crap, because there's people's opinions I want to know. There's other fighters, media people, I want to see what they're saying. The general gist of the public, what they think, but it is tough, because it literally took me maybe 8 years to not let things bother me, because for me, being non-confrontational, I just didn't understand how somebody could watch me fight and be like, I hate that guy. Right. Be like, man, why? And say the most like vulgar, awful things about me, and I'm like, I did nothing to you. Like, what did I do? I didn't say anything to you. I didn't say anything about anybody else. You just decided not to like me. So that took me a long time to comprehend and be able to be okay with it. And I think it made me a stronger person, but I don't appreciate it, but it is what it is, and it's something that comes along with it. You know?
Yeah. Do you think there's similarities? Like, you've got a few businesses now, as you said. You've got this facility here that you've been partnering with, and you've got your one in Palm Springs and another new one. Is there similarities between building a business and going through all the ups and downs of that as being in the sort of, you know, the fight game, would you say?
Yeah, it's definitely a fight, you know. There's a lot of similarities, you know, and the one thing that I did learn very quickly about business was when I was a little bit more naive, and I mean, I'm talking early 20s when I'm having my first experiences, is if you can be taken advantage of, then people will, you know. They're looking to put themselves in the best situation, and they want to be successful, and they don't care if they step on you to get it. And I learned that, you know, that's not the way I want to do things. I wanted to make sure that I filtered through the people that I really like being around, and be like, man, let's both be successful. Let's both be, happy with the way things went down. And for me, that's been something I really focus on and put a lot of thought into, because I don't want to not like the guy I'm doing business with, you know. And in the sports and MMA, we have to do that as well. Or maybe a guy that I don't like, that I have to do media with and sit next to, you know. And you just it is what it is. So in business, there's that. But if I can try to be around good people, then that's what I'm gonna try to do.
Yeah. And I guess in business, I don't know what the percentage is, but a huge percentage of businesses fail in the first 5 years. You know, some 80-90% of them. In the business you're in, your sports world, you know, there's obviously you've had a lot of wins, but you've also lost. You know, how do you deal with a big loss and bounce back again?
I mean, I think everybody deals with it differently. I think some people have to basically convince themselves that it was a mistake to be able to come back, you know, fully. It's pretty crazy because, like, in the sport of boxing, you get a guy that loses one time and he'll never come back. In our sport, nobody goes undefeated. You know, it's like, it's almost impossible. If you stay in the sport long enough, you are going to lose, you know, and unless you're not fighting any real competition. But even then, it's still pretty likely that you're going to lose. So in our sport, you just have to learn to make adjustments or get over it or really dig down deep and reinvent. And for myself, that's always been the way that I went, is I was always brutally honest with myself, and I would read all the opinions, I would listen to my coaches, and I would say, go ahead, tell me everything I did wrong. Like, I may not agree with you, and we may argue on some things, but I want to hear your opinion. You tell me, because only then, when people are being honest with me, then I can uncover what's really going on. You know,
right.
Like, okay, I didn't train hard enough, or I didn't do this enough, or I need to spend more time doing this. There's so many things, or maybe my mental state wasn't right, or maybe it was a home life. Maybe my diet wasn't right. There's so many things that it could be. And with your team of people around you, if you allow them to be honest with you and you can take it, I think that for me has been the way I dealt with it.
Right. And how did you, obviously coming off your last fight, how did you feel after that? You know, did you sort of, you know, make a decision about kind of how it happened and what you would do going forward?
Yeah, and then I'm still in that process, right. You know, and because it's pretty fresh.
Yeah.
Still got a little bit of a black eye. But yeah, to me, this last one was weird. It was frustrating because I got a lot of hate from it.
Really?
Because people felt like I wasn't myself. I didn't attack so much. But people don't know the real story behind things. They don't know what's going on. They don't know. They never get the whole picture. They just see you fight and then they make their opinions. So I don't want to make any excuses and get into that. I told myself I wasn't going to. But the thing is that I felt like I did good. I felt like I could have fought better. Right. I felt like with the circumstances and the time that we fought before, I got beat up pretty bad. It was my worst loss. A couple other times I've been caught and had a flying knee, get choked. It's like I didn't even feel like I got in a fight. Like, that was the only time I literally got beat up, right? And I felt the effects of it for months. You know, my face was swollen. I had like 8 cuts on my face, side of the head. Like, that night was probably the worst night of sleep I ever had. I had a headache. I just couldn't get comfortable. My whole face was swollen. All the skin was taken off my back from just getting taken down, right? So to come back and fight the same guy on a short amount of time and break down his game and neutralize his game like I did, which I couldn't do the first time. I was proud of that. Yeah. But I still lost. Right. And so I still felt like he outworked me. So I felt like I won a small battle, but I lost a bigger one. Yeah. You know, so it's kind of a conflicting, fight for me. But the one thing that I do know is I feel like I made a lot of progress, and I feel like moving forward, I'm like excited about what I'm going to be able to do from here. Yeah.
And do you think that's important for people, again, whether they're in a sport like you are or in business, to, I guess there are always going to be times where you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. Nobody has a clean record. Do you think it's important to separate yourself from the situation and say, well, I prepared, I did everything I can, and that was it, and just kind of don't beat yourself up even more about it. You know, is that something that, because I have the same, you know, I've got a business and it's up and down, it's a roller coaster, and you know, in business battles you lose them, or you fail with a venture, and sometimes you can spend a long time just beating yourself up mentally. And I guess that's not really, doesn't really help you get back on your feet again, does it?
Well, I mean, I love this question because this is something I figured out about myself, and when I realized the way I was doing it with fighting, I realized that I would be able to translate that into business and other things of life, and kind of spread that knowledge. And is the way that I've always done it with fighting is when I lose a fight, I don't feel like I'm a failure. I feel like the person that the fighter that I created in this training camp failed. Right. So my prototype, I'm the inventor, and my prototype, my invention failed, right?
Yeah.
So I go back to the drawing board and I reevaluate, I rebuild, and I come back for the next one and I win. And then I win the next one and then I fail, right? But I'm not the failure. My invention failed, right?
Yeah.
So I have to rebuild. And you know, any inventor, they're gonna succeed on their 10th, 15th, 20th, right? So I feel like if you have that thought process going into business, it's gonna be great. You know, it's like, okay, the way I went about this business, it succeeded for 6 months, and then the market adjusted, and there's a new trend. I'm a failure? No. Is the way you went about the business, your invention, your prototype, that's failing. Yeah. So let's rebuild it. Try it again. Send out a new prototype. So I think when you separate yourself from what you did to who you are, I think that's important.
Yeah.
So for me as a fighter, I don't feel like a failure. I feel like the fighter that I created for that day, that you know, piece of the puzzles with all my coaches and all the work I put in and the execution, that didn't, you know, live up to what I was hoping.
Yeah.
So let me rebuild.
Yeah.
And then when I'm winning, oh man, it's minor tweaks, and then if it fails, rebuild.
Yeah.
You know, and that's been my mentality, and that's been helped me have a long career.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. I hadn't done it before, but I suppose like us, we make all of these products here, and you'll do the first version, you think it's perfect, and you put it out to market, and when it goes in a place like this, suddenly you didn't realize that was going to happen to it. So it comes back in and you change it, and you know, you probably have 4 versions of the product as you go over time, but it's not a failure because you think, well, I can do it. And I suppose in your world it's probably the same. It's like, well, I didn't realize that was going to come at me, and you know,
something you never thought. And then it's like, if you give up on your first try, then no one would get anywhere. So I think it's very hard to think like that, but if you can, then you're going to be a higher chance you're going to be successful down the road.
The difference is in what you do is there's a lot of physical implications again. You know, it's a lot more. There's a lot more painful, I guess, in what you do in making a product.
Yeah. Well, I mean, see, to me, it's like if I lose and I'm losing my product, maybe I break a bone, I'm going to heal. Like, to me in business, the fear of losing other people's money or my own money, like, that's pretty painful. You know, if I lost someone else's money just because of a mistake, man, to me that's difficult, you know, because I'm not the kind of person that wants to put his passion in to be wrong and have to tell somebody, man, I messed up and we lost our money, you know, but that's something that I'm gonna have to get past it, you know, if I want to keep pursuing businesses and stuff like that. Luckily, I haven't had a crash and burn like that yet, but I mean, eventually I'm sure it'll happen and I'll have to recover.
So what's your thought about where do you see your professional sports career going and business career? What are your plans for both of those?
I often get asked that because I've been a professional for 14 years, and it's crazy. I can't even believe it. But yeah, I don't want to do this forever. I do think about long-term health and things like that, and I just started a family, so I mean that all comes into play. So I mean, I with my manager always, you know, telling me about things and listening to people that are smarter than me with money and things like that, I've always kind of had a plan and always added to it over time, and right now I have a pretty solid retirement plan of what I want to accomplish financially with the sport. And then separate from that, as a competitor, I have accomplishments that I have, you know. So those two things I'm trying my hardest to fulfill.
Right.
And then at the same time, I'm trying to start, jogging with the whole business thing. That way it's an easier transition for me over time. You know, it's not like I'm 100% like I was my whole 20s, a decade. I was 100% in the fight game. Didn't care about anything else. Didn't want to care. I knew that I had to make all the sacrifices, and that now it's like if I don't start, getting a running start with what comes next, it's going to be very difficult for me to change mindsets.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's been taking baby steps, and now I feel like I got a little jog going, and I want to be in like a fast-paced jog for when I retire from fighting, to go ahead and go right into my next job.
Yeah. Is that difficult to because I know in business you've got to be totally immersed to make it work, and I'm sure in your sport you've got to do the same. Is it difficult to kind of be thinking of two things at the same time and sort of, have you got to kind of be totally immersed and say, well, look, when I'm finished that, I'm going to look at it, or can you kind of keep two plates spinning?
That's been the thing, is what I can take on,
right.
And that's been everything I've learned with fighting, having to do the media and all these obligations you have to do while I'm supposed to be 100% focused on this fight. You learn, and it's difficult, but the one thing I've been able to do with having businesses and fighting is, one, I can't do everything, and just like fighting, you have to have a team around you, and you build based upon skill sets. So if I need to learn better boxing, I'm going to have a boxing coach, I'm going to have a kickboxing coach, and I'm going to have a jiu-jitsu coach, and I'm not going to expect my jiu-jitsu coach to teach me striking, right? Everybody, right, has their set place, and just like in the business world, you have idea guys, and you have doers, and you got guys that can do anything you ask them to do. Then you got guys that are decision makers. There's people that are very good at certain things, and you have to build a team around you, right? And for me, being a little less experienced in the beginning, I put those right people that I trusted around me to help me make decisions, and I'm involved in the decisions, but I'm really leaning on you to help me make these decisions, because you know more than me at the time if you're a part of my team.
Yeah.
And by then I'm just learning, right? And if we fail together, then we learn it. But all those little things add up, and I just become more and more knowledgeable about what I'm doing, and with that help.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping by the time that I'm done fighting and I'm ready to really roll into the business aspect, I'll have a wealth of knowledge already.
Yeah.
And even if I have to go back to school and take a couple classes here and there just to learn formally a few things, but I mean, I've been learning on the job. So I mean, I feel pretty fortunate with the people I have around me and the situations I've been able to be in.
Yeah, it sounds again very similar. Your martial arts, having this team of people that, rather than you trying to do everything, is getting the right people in the right places. And business, certainly I've found, is the same. Is as an entrepreneur and as a leader, you want to be able to empower people to do it so that you can do other businesses. So it's very interesting, really. What do you think in terms of being able to sort of transition? At some point, nobody can continue that for a long time, but I guess it's quite a difficult thing to sort of decide, well, when are you going to go out? Are you going to go out on a high? You're going to go out potentially losing? When's the right time? And then I guess you've also got the sort of ego part where it's like, well, you kind of done so well, and as you get older, you see it in boxing quite a lot, I guess, where people kind of keep going back in, and it's almost a shame to see some people in there. How have you thought through that process? What would be your ideal way of going out of the game?
To me, it's pretty easy. I never wanted to get put out. I never wanted to, go out because of injury or because I just couldn't win. I wanted to go out when I wanted to go out, and I put myself in that position so far. And I've been close with some injuries, which made me be even more prepared, and actually made me be bigger about my whole business side of it and retirement side, because I've been so close with a couple injuries. But I feel fortunate that I really want to leave the sport when I see a decline in my performance, and when my coaches, and I'll ask them to be honest with me, if you see a decline in my performance, and I really don't think I've even seen my peak yet, or getting close. I'm, to most fighters, I would be right in my peak right now, or even close to the end.
Right.
But I know with my family heritage, with my Swedish side of the family, we peak later. Right. So I feel like that's an advantage for me. But like I said, when I see a real decline in my performance, and I can be honest with myself about that, and my coaches can say, hey, you're slowing down, you're not recovering, those things, I don't want to see that sad fights anymore. Right. I'm not going to go in there to get beat up, So when I see a decline in my performance, I'll be the first one to admit it, you know. But until then, I'm always just chasing the last performance. Yeah. Am I better than that guy? Am I better than the guy that fought last year? Am I better than the guy that fought 2 years ago? When I was getting knockouts back to back to back, was I better then, or are people just catching up to my game? Those are questions I ask myself, and I'm going to continue to ask myself, because I don't want to be the last one to know. Yeah. I don't want to be the last one to know, hey, you're not good anymore.
What fuels you? What motivates you still? Because you've been very successful now. You're getting involved in the business world and doing like stuff. What is it? Is it your children, family? Is it just something inside you? What kind of drives you?
I still have the fire, and I'm still chasing the perfect performance. Like I never even got close to it, and then maybe the Duho Choi fight, which got fight of the year, people remember. That was just the right opponent, the right time, the right venue. It was just miracle of a circumstance, and we had a hell of a fight. Yeah. And I don't think that was my sharpest performance, but I showed grit, and I stepped up, and I performed well. But I still don't think that was my career performance. So far, that's the performance that people are always going to remember. Yeah. But I honestly feel like I can top it. I honestly feel like that's not the best me that we've seen. I feel like that's what motivates me, is knowing that I could do better than that. And it's like, why would I quit before I've painted my masterpiece? To me, it's like I'm an artist, and I'm just painting these paintings, and I'm just waiting to have that masterpiece and go, wow, I just can't outdo this. I can't. And if I try a couple times after and it's not even close, then that's the time to hang it up, Yeah. And that's what I've been chasing for 14 years. And
you've still got that in you I guess that's like business. You just you feel as though you've got this in you, and there's more to give or more to do, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. and I've been able to stay hungry all this time, and luckily I've been real. A lot of people see this as a sport, or just a fight. Right. Not really as I'm a professional athlete, and over the years of maturing, I've learned how to become a professional athlete and take care of myself, and I don't always eat right, and I do love cookies and things like that. But I know that when I'm in this window and I have this fight coming up or whatever, I'm very strict on myself, and I'm willing to do what it takes, and that's what's kept me in the game so long. Right. It's like, even if there's a huge opportunity, it's like, hey, there's this movie premiere, or hey, they want you to play in this golf tournament, and it's like cool, and it's like so close to my fight, I'll say no, because I know, like, hey, if I win this fight, they're going to be calling me again. So I'd rather miss the opportunity and win the fight than do the opportunity and lose the fight. Right. If I had to choose. So that mentality is really paid off for me over the years. Yeah.
And so, final question then. So, Escape Your Limits is about escaping what, I guess, people around you or even yourself say that's probably impossible, and then going on and achieving something that's impossible yourself. What would be an example of where you've escaped your own personal limits or limits of people around you think you couldn't have actually done?
I mean, just making it where I am. As a kid, I was always told you could be anything you want, and I believe in that. I believe in being naive enough to have that dream and go, okay, yeah, set that bar high, And where I come from in the Palm Springs area, there's, kids feel like they're trapped there. They feel like they're not going to make it out. In sports, they rarely make it out. Feel like no one's looking in that little area, that it's not popular enough, big enough for people to be looking for anybody in that area, right? So it's like an area where people are a little closed-minded to thinking that they can have big dreams. And when I had a big dream, I was naive enough to to really go at it all the way. You know, looking back going, I did that and that and that. I made those decisions and it paid off. Like looking back at the age I am now, it seems crazy that I would go fight in Tijuana or I would do these things, but like I said, I was naive enough to believe I could do it, and I was willing, to take the risk. And I think that's what it's all about. If you're willing to take the risk and you're willing to work hard and you're willing to not give up, then you're going to be successful at something.
Right. And I know I said that was the last one, but you've raised something in mind. So if there are like younger people watching that are probably not in the job that they want, and they may not have the support and may not have the finances, but they've got a dream. What would be one thing that you would say that they can hold on to sort of give them that that kick or that sort of inspiration that they can actually do it? What would be your advice to someone young, or your younger self?
that they can. It's hard to say because I get so many people come into my gym and they go, I want to be your next star. It's just like I told my first instructor, but they'll always follow up with, I can't afford to pay you, but trust me. And I always get kind of that. Every gym owner knows that. It's like fight gym owner knows this question. And then I look to my left and my right and I see some of my guys that I really invested in, and this guy's driving 3 hours multiple times a week to work out, pays dues, works full-time job, is driving both directions, barely getting any sleep, holding together a job, doing all these things, right? And this guy over here is doing, all these things, working, 3 or 4 jobs just to pay and do this and travel. If I say, hey, there's this seminar in a state away, or I want you to come here, they make it happen. There's those people. And then I see the guy in the middle that's asking for these handouts. And I go, that's the difference right there. Right. It's just about how bad you want it and what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're willing to go through for the long term.
Right.
People only see what's right in front of them, but it's like, hey, if I put my head down and I just work really hard and cut all these things back, and I just can see that end goal, I could see the finish line, you'll make it. It's just about if you're willing to endure that. And most people, they just want the short-term satisfaction, and they can't ever just close their eyes and make it to the finish line. They just want that little, that
quick win.
The quick win. Yeah, they want to go to work, and then that's fine. If you want to just go to work and slave through a job and you're happy places at home with your family, I think that's cool. But if you're somebody that wants to be great at something, somebody wants more, something wants to reach further, then you're going to have to make those sacrifices. You're going to have to get down in the dirt and crawl for it. You're going to have to be willing to go further than the guy next to you. And that is just simple.
Well, Cub, you're an inspiration, certainly for me. I've learned a lot in this last hour. Best of luck for the business and for your athlete career, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.